some of the partisanship and the polarization that we see at the national level and maybe at the state level is reaching down into the localities. They're sacrificing part of their life toward this community for whatever period of time it is. It took the public investment to do that, and now the private investment followed, and now we see a vibrant corridor. It was a facility that the city owned that was in disrepair. And whether there was a minor league baseball team there or not, there are things that happened there in that space that if you wanted it to continue to happen, it needed to be revitalized. If the train had not fallen into the river, I don't know what would have happened. I was convinced when I was walking down the hill that the Depot Grill was gone. Glass was brought to a standard, and the feeling was that the students who went to Heritage High School deserved the same standard. And if they're fighting among themselves over things that are, again, from my perspective, not important to delivering services daily, which is what my job is, to deliver services daily, it makes it a more difficult environment. As soon as they get elected, they're told, if you don't do what the party that supported you tells you to do, then you're a bad elected official. My goal when I came to Lynchburg was to leave it better than when I came. I hope it's better.
Welcome to another edition of No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today, former city manager here in Lynchburg, Kim Payne. Hi, Kim. How are
Rich.
you?
Good. I'm well.
First question for you. Are you relieved you're no longer the city manager based on what's going on council these days?
Well, I haven't been the city manager now for almost 10 years. Yeah. So I was relieved 10 years ago when I stopped being the city manager. Yeah, so I'm not looking to come back.
A little different now, it seems like.
It's different. Yeah, it's different. There's just a different environment, and not just here, but I think in other places as well. It's the world for local government managers has changed.
And, since leaving as the city manager of Lynchburg, you do a lot of consulting work with other cities and counties in Virginia to kind of help the people in similar positions to, just sharing some of your expertise and kind of trying to help them out and mentor them.
Well, hopefully I've learned something over the years, and that I can share that knowledge, and maybe I can say, well, maybe you might not try that, or maybe you try this instead, or I tried this and it didn't work, or whatever. So yeah, I've been fortunate that I'm able to go around and work with cities, counties, and towns all across the Commonwealth to try to work with their governing bodies, work with their local government managers, and try to help them maybe find a path forward that might be beneficial for them.
And one of the things that I asked you as we were kind of, getting ready to do this conversation, to have this conversation, was, what we've seen in Lynchburg. And I certainly don't want to dwell on what's going on, with city council, but the fireworks, the partisan politics, the name calling. I asked you, is this going on in other areas of the state or is this unique to Lynchburg? And unfortunately, it's not unique.
It's not unique.
Yeah.
It's not rampant, but there's enough of it going around the state that it's obvious when it happens, and the country as well. Some of the partisanship and the polarization that we see at the national level and maybe at the state level is reaching down into the localities, and it's unfortunate because I think a local government has a completely different mission than, say, a state government or a federal government at some level, and in areas where that may be damaging to that mission, I think that's unfortunate.
And as the city manager, and I know this is one of the first questions that I asked you as we were preparing to have this conversation was, what exactly is a city manager? What does a city manager do? You're involved with council. You answer to council, as you explained. But one of the interesting dynamics of, city council members is they're regular citizens. Being a council member is just a part-time job, and they don't necessarily have a level of expertise in terms of what's going on in the city or what they're going to be dealing with budget-wise or otherwise. So that's got to make the city manager's job even more difficult.
I don't know that it makes it more difficult. It just makes it's a different kind of challenge, and it's an opportunity. I think every city manager, every local government manager, so I'm including kind of city managers and county administrators and town managers, and there's a little bit of differences in their authority and how they work, but every manager has an opportunity, which is what I enjoyed, to kind of be a teacher, to kind of say, here's the environment as I see it, here's the reality of the world we're operating in. These are the rules. These are the laws we have to follow. And then to work with that governing body to help them reach some consensus on a path forward, given that every community is facing challenges and opportunities for them to pursue to make the community better. And so I enjoyed that part of being a city manager, was to say, well, this is the way I see it, and this is the information that I'm gathering and sharing with you. Now, can we find a path forward?
And that's a big part of it, right? Is trying to get not all, but enough of the members of council to agree on something so that you kind of have your marching orders and can move forward. Whether it's something that you personally agree with or not, you do answer as the city manager to council. Right.
The manager responds and works for council, works as an at-will employee of council. So really no promise of continued employment past the next meeting. I have unfortunately had friends who walked into a meeting and left without a job, but that's just the way it works sometimes. But yeah, you are looking for that consensus to move forward. What I always hoped was at least all of them would listen to me and consider what I had to say, and then 4 of them, in my case, with the council of 7, have to reach a conclusion and move forward.
You know, it was interesting, and I think I told you right before we started that I talked to a few former council members who served on council when you were the city manager. And one of the things, and I know you discussed this with me previously as well, but the rule of 4, right? You talked about 7, 4 is a majority.
Yeah,
once you get to that magic number, let's move on.
Exactly. And I used to, I think I told you that I would try to catch the mayor's eye and say, look, we've got 4 votes. We've heard from everybody 3 times now. Mm-hmm. We're probably not going to change any more minds. Let's move. And of course, the manager is always looking for that instruction from the governing body. Just tell me what you want me to do. And as long as I feel I can do it morally and ethically and legally, then I'm going to do it because that's their job, is to set that policy direction. But if we've got 4, let's do it. If we've got 5 or 6, that's even better. If we've got 7, that's okay too. But if we're really dealing with a difficult issue and we could either go in this direction or that direction, just give me 4 votes.
But your job as city manager is a lot more than just doing what council tells you, because like you said, you have to educate them. A lot of them may not. I mean, you're talking about people who have real full-time jobs, and and that's the crazy part about it. When you see all that the council members are dealing with and the length of these meetings and the extra sessions and everything that's going on, to realize that this is just a part-time job that they do, sort of for peanuts, right?
Well, I don't think they do it for the money. I think they do it because they want to make their community better, and that's the respect that I owed to any governing body, to any elected official. Even if I disagreed with where they were coming from, I think they deserve a lot of credit for putting themselves forward, for offering themselves in service to the community, and saying and it's a sacrifice. Maybe they don't realize it when they're running, but they certainly realize it once they start serving. They're sacrificing part of their life toward this community for whatever period of time it is. I could never do what they do. I could never go out and knock on the doors and the work they have to put in. And so I think every local government manager has to have a basic level of respect for those people who have chosen to serve and have been elected to serve, and then for that form of government, because you wouldn't want a form of government where I was making all the calls and I had complete power and authority. And so you need that governing body to set direction, determine what's important. But as you said, there's a lot of things that are going on daily, day to day in service delivery. And that's why you have a manager, because it's so complicated that a group of 7, it's hard for them. They couldn't do it, I don't think. And we went through this back in the early 1900s when the local governments were falling apart. And that's when the local government manager form of government came into play.
You talk about local government managers, whether it be city or county, and you were explaining to me previously as well that Virginia is a little bit different than all the other states because of the city not being part of the county.
Our separation of cities and counties, where our cities are independent of the counties that either surround them or that are adjacent to them. So every city kind of operates like a small county. in like they do in other states.
What are the benefits of that? What are the detractions?
I'm not really sure that I can tell you what the benefits are. I mean, we've been doing it this way for 400 years, so it's not going to change. But I guess maybe part of the benefit might be that a community, a densely populated community, which is what a city generally is, with similar interests, has maybe a little bit more freedom to act as that group, as that municipality, without oversight or influence by a surrounding or an overriding county. In every other state, the city's part of the county, and so the county will provide a certain level of services. Maybe it's the school system, maybe it's a library system or a social services system or the court systems. And so in Virginia, all that is within the city itself. And so maybe there's a little bit more autonomy there. But on the other side, cities are very constricted in how they can grow. They can't grow anymore in Virginia, land-wise. They can only grow in terms of greater density.
Population, sure.
Population. And I think there's some inefficiencies that are brought in when cities of certain sizes, we have very small cities in Virginia and some very large cities, of course. But when you've got a duplication of services and you've got just a number of positions that, frankly, I believe could be handled on a regional basis with less positions and less cost to the taxpayer.
So, if you were running the world, this wouldn't be the setup that you would recommend.
Well, probably not, but I don't think anybody would want me running the world. And all this gets debated periodically, and it's just a lot of tradition in Virginia and a lot of reasons why it's not going to change.
Speaking of change, a lot changed during your tenure as the city manager. Most notably, I think there were three big accomplishments that I saw and that we talked about: downtown revitalization, heritage, and city stadium were three big ones, and I know you're awfully proud of all three of those.
Well, we tend to focus on the kind of the built environment, and because those things, well, you have a ribbon cutting, you have a groundbreaking, and they're there, and they have so you can kind of see that legacy. I also shared with you though that I was very proud of some legacies that you don't have plaques built for, and you don't have ribbon cuttings for, and that is just the quality of the services that were being delivered across the city by an incredible group of public servants who I still think are delivering those services on a daily basis and doing a great job.
The stuff that really kind of gets taken for granted, right? The trash is picked up and
snow gets plowed, water gets delivered. When it goes down the drain, it's gone, right? But no, it's not. The city's got to deal with it. We've got to manage all of that. So all of those things that create an environment in which people can live their lives, raise their families, work their jobs, do the things that they want to do without having to worry about, do I have power? In the town of Bedford's case, they actually provide power. But do I have, is it safe? Do I have water? Do I have wastewater treatment? Are my streets getting taken care of? People shouldn't have to worry about that. And I think if the local government's doing their job right, then it works seamlessly and people don't even think about it.
Let's talk about the downtown revitalization for a minute. When I first moved here, drove downtown, I remember it being on a Saturday, and there aren't many traffic lights downtown.
It's even fewer now, which is better.
but I distinctly remember driving through it, and it was, 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and it was just a blinking yellow light. And I'm thinking to myself, man, what's going on here? Like most other cities I was in, stuff was happening downtown, restaurants, all these different things. And, we now see that. And that was part of a massive, what was it, a 20-year project that you guys...
It's still going on, but 20 years. The downtown city council adopted a downtown master plan in 2001. So right about the time I got here, but they've been working on it for a few years ahead of time. And Lynchburg was fortunate that it had a great leader in the community development department, Rachel Flynn, who very polarizing figure, but look at the results. And I think her vision and her sense and her prodding and pushing in some cases generated something that we were able to build on. And that's really one of the reasons that I wanted to come to Lynchburg, was because I remembered Lynchburg as a child. That was the only place to shop, was downtown Lynchburg. And plus I had been in a county adjacent to Fredericksburg and seen what was happening in downtown Fredericksburg, which was just a marvelous downtown. And the opportunity to come here and be a part of that in Lynchburg was one of the major reasons that I wanted to come back to Lynchburg.
Did it turn out? And I know you said that, there's still some work going on. And
definitely not finished.
But I mean, as far as where it's at right now, what you envisioned different than you envisioned?
I think for the most part, it's fairly consistent with the master plan that was adopted by council in 2001. The first casualty of any engagement is the plan. So the plan has to be flexible. And one of the things I used to encourage our staff, particularly our community development staff, was if we planned this, it wouldn't work, because we don't have that control. We've got to let the market and the private sector and all the individual decisions have an opportunity to be flexible and to work downtown. And so I don't know that I really knew it's going to look like this thing, but I'm pretty pleased with the way it looks. But again, we have some major anchors downtown, which were very important that those get developed. Everything from the Academy to the Craddock Terry Hotel, the Virginian, the Social Services Building, Amazement Square. So you can see some of the major anchors, the federal courthouse. What's still lacking, though, is we don't have enough of a street front presence with commercial enterprises yet. And I think it's coming slowly, but that's still one of the things you see, is too many empty storefronts.
Why?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's a combination of, it's very hard to be a small business owner now, and to make that investment. I think that it's a combination. We have some building owners downtown who think they're going to, get rich, and maybe their rents are too high, and they can't support a small business owner going in there. I think that's part of it. We have some buildings that still need some work to make them even habitable. I think we're probably getting the critical mass of people living down and around downtown that could support some of that.
Could part of it be the work that's still being done, right, where roads are closed? And
well, that's been unfortunate in the last almost 10 years now. I mean, I got out right as that was starting, so I was like, whew. But that has been hard on a lot of these small businesses who have a very small margin anyway.
Right.
And I think the city's gone to extraordinary efforts to try to work with that. But the reality is, when you're digging a hole in front of the business, it's going to be disruptive. And so I'm hoping once we get beyond that, and frankly, the two-way traffic situation, the one-way traffic pairs was not a good thing for businesses. And so I think all these things are coming in place, and I think the future is probably promising if the economy allows for small business investment. And it's getting more difficult to do that.
And I'm not 100% up to speed on this, which is why I'm glad you're here, so you could kind of fill me in. But, I'd heard about different grants, and we're seeing businesses come in because of grants, but when the grants run out, they're not able to sustain. And that's why we see some businesses that might be coming and going a little bit more so than, being here for the long haul. Is that a big part of it?
Well, I'd always heard this kind of rule of thumb or tradition or reality that half of small businesses fail within 5 years.
Right.
And so you're already fighting against a current that's already kind of working against you. I think some of the things that the city has done to support not only building improvement, facade improvements, things like that, some tax credits that have been available for redevelopment of buildings downtown. And then I'm particularly think what has been particularly effective is the work that has been done with the small business owner to help them to have a business plan, to understand, what it takes in terms of cash flow and income and outgo and what it's going to cost, and helping the people to be prepared to implement maybe a great idea and a great thing that they can sell. But if the money doesn't work, it's not going to work.
Right.
And so I think what the Economic Development Department has done downtown is and the Small Business Center and other groups to really help people understand, how does this business model work? Because if you don't have a successful business model, the investment in the building and everything else is just not going to work for you.
When you first got here and took over as city manager in 2001, like you said, this was all just kind of in the very beginning stages. But I remember buildings downtown being bought for $1, and what was it like? And, was this plan necessary to really get people to invest? You talk about the private-public partnership. I mean, that was critical to this, wasn't it?
I think the absolute critical thing was that City Council, when they approved the downtown master plan, they committed to putting $1 million a year into downtown redevelopment as a capital investment. It's a truism, but private sector money will follow public sector money. And if the private sector sees that the public sector values what they've got and is putting an investment in there, then they will say, okay, I feel a little bit more comfortable taking this risk to come in there. And the investment in city started with the improvements to Monument Terrace, with the improvements to 9th Street, then the improvements down on Jefferson Street, ultimately the Bluff Walk. Think about walking down the Bluff Walk now, and if you didn't get a chance to walk down there to see the Christmas lights,
sure.
But look at the businesses that are there, that are open, and there was nothing there. There were no doors to that space. It took the public investment to do that, and now the private investment followed, and now we see a vibrant corridor where money's being made and values have gone up. And tax revenue has gone up because of the public investment. And it took that investment for over 20 years, $1 million a year, to pay off.
Why do you figure, like I was saying earlier, most cities have a pretty vibrant downtown where there's a lot going on.
I wouldn't say most. I would say many.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, there was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, a lot of businesses moved out of downtowns. They moved into strip shopping centers. The Plaza was opened in 1963 here. And I remember that as a child. And that's when the business started moving out of downtown, the department stores and the other businesses. And then they went to malls. And now malls have kind of gone through their life cycle, and some are coming back. We are fortunate to have a pretty vibrant one here, I think, but they've died in other places. And so a lot of commerce moved out of downtown.
Why?
In the cars. People moved into suburbs, and it was more convenient for them to shop in the suburb out, closer to where they lived, than to drive downtown with traffic, parking. And so as we shifted to more of a car environment, it became more difficult for downtowns to function. And I think that we went through that trend, and then we've kind of seen it come back. And I think Lynchburg was fortunate to take advantage of that trend for people moving back downtown, as empty nesters, baby boomers said, well, I remember downtown as a child. Maybe I'd like to go back and live there. And then as young people moved into downtown because they grew up in the suburbs and they wanted a different environment. And so Lynchburg, Richmond, Roanoke, other places have taken advantage of that. But in the 60s and 70s, a lot of downtowns were just empty. And Lynchburg was part of that. And
I guess I was kind of speaking more from my experience, when I got here, because the places that I had been were mostly, hey, there was a lot going on.
Lynchburg was behind the curve, I think. We used to always say that a recession comes a little later in Lynchburg, but the recovery comes a little later also. And so I think Lynchburg was just a little bit behind the curve compared to maybe other localities. But
is it still that way? It feels like it is still that way.
Maybe. I just think things don't move quite as fast here. We don't get impacted by the events as quickly maybe as other places do. But ultimately, when it comes, it's going to come. I remember probably one of our biggest challenges when I was a city manager was the Great Recession of 2009. And we saw it coming because it was hitting everybody else in late 2008. It nailed us in about February of 2009. We got slammed, but it was about 3 or 4 months behind everybody else. And then, we got out of it, but a little bit behind everybody else as well. And you'll see that with things like unemployment rates and other things. It just seems that Central Virginia maybe lags a little bit, and then, it both in a downturn, but also in a recovery.
Right. Does it also seem, because it feels to me that in addition to being, having that lag effect, that it also is more, and I'm not going to find the right word here, but more maybe moderated, where the highs aren't quite as high as the rest of the country, but the lows aren't quite as low either?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a little bit more moderate. We don't have the wild swings maybe that other places have. I think we're generally a more stable environment, and that's a good thing.
One of the other things that I've noticed, Lynchburg people want to support local Lynchburg businesses and local Lynchburg people more so maybe than other areas.
True, but they all want a Trader Joe's, and they all and a Costco, and
Right.
So I mean, we kind of go both ways.
Right.
But no, I think what happens, because Lynchburg maybe doesn't have an interstate, because of its location, because we are more of a central core city serving the region that is around Lynchburg, there is a lot of support for local people doing well and to support local businesses. And I think that's a great thing.
You talked about being here when you were younger. You went to Duke.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. That's still a tough one for me to swallow. But, and we're up in Spotsylvania, like you said, in the Fredericksburg area before coming back to Lynchburg. And one of the questions that I asked you was, how important is it to really know the area that you're going to be, a manager in, or city council, right? I mean, if you're going to be representing people and making decisions based on a city or a county or a municipality or whatever the case might be, you really should know that place pretty well, right? I mean,
I think it's important. I think it's very important to understand the culture. And understand that the cultures change. I mean, Lynchburg went through an enormous change in the 50s and the 60s when GE came here, and has gone through a lot of change that it's not immediate, but to have an appreciation for that, to understand the history of an area. I just happen to be a local history fan, so everywhere I've gone, I like to know, well, what's happened there over 100, 200 years. But when I go now to do consulting across the state, I try to learn as much about that community as I possibly can, because I don't want to go in there and say, well, this worked in Lynchburg, so you ought to try it here.
Right.
No, it might not work here for whatever reason. But I just find local history fascinating as to how people lived and formed their community. And I think a good government manager and a good elected official will have an understanding and appreciation for that history. Not that you have to repeat it, but you learn from it and as you try to move a community forward. Important
for council members as well and people who are elected officials to really know the history, maybe have lived here for a certain period of time.
I think so. That doesn't mean that someone who hasn't lived here for a long time can't. I mean, if you run for council and get elected,
right, of course,
and that's what you've got. You've got that credibility. But I do think having an appreciation and saying, well, maybe I came here from somewhere and I want to make it like where I came from. Well, okay, but first of all, you can't do it alone. That's where the rule of four is really more important. Yeah. You've got to work with 6 others to find some consensus to move things forward, and then you might want to talk to others. I think part of that's maybe going back to Rachel Flynn for a minute, or why she was so polarizing, is that she was seen by many as an outsider who was coming in here and saying, well, this is the way it ought to happen in Lynchburg. I happen to think she was right, and many people do, but other people, you can understand the resistance of an outsider coming in and saying, you're doing it all wrong. You need to change this. Well, it might be wrong, and there may be a better way, but we need to have a conversation about that. and then we need to ultimately reach some consensus that this is a way forward. It might be a little bit different than the way we've done in the past, but this is a way we're willing to go forward.
Back to the downtown revitalization, City Council agreed to do the 20 years, $1 million a year. But then my understanding is that plan changed and kind of got accelerated.
Well, it wasn't enough money. When it worked for like the 9th Street and Monument Terrace and some other projects, but when we got to the point where we were going to try to do the Bluff Walk, my recollection is that was a multi-million-dollar project. It needed to happen faster than just doing it $1 million a year. It needed to be finished in a relatively short period of time. We just couldn't do, a couple of blocks and then which is kind of what the downtown utility system has been. Mm-hmm. You can see why that is a challenge. And so the good thing about the Bluff Walk is that nobody was open on it already. So you could go in there and do it and finish it and then open it up again. You can't do that on a city street, active city street. And so we needed $3, $4, $5 million to do it. And you mentioned talking to Randy Nelson. Randy was a champion who said, we need to look at another way to do this. And we basically borrowed the money from ourselves and then paid ourselves back over the 3 or 4 years it took. But we were able to find the resources to do that project, finish it within a relatively short period of time and get it open for then it to be a benefit. So you have to be adjustable and flexible and adaptable. But the thing that was good was the city council always kept the goal in mind. And they agreed, as the majority of council agreed to the vision and to the goal and said, this is what we're going to do.
Quick shout out to Jeff Helgeson, huh?
Well, Jeff had his own perspective. And, again, he's an elected official. I respect and honor that. He's representing an area that was annexed in 1976, and some people have never gotten over that annexation from 19. This is Virginia. We have long memories.
I know some people who haven't gotten over the Civil War.
Well, that's true too. But the annexation really, I think. So he was representing a part of the city that, in some ways, didn't really feel like it was a part of the city, because it didn't have that history. And again, this is where it's important to understand that history. When I remember when I was a child, I tell the story. I went to bed as a county mouse, and I woke up as a city mouse. I was living in Bedford County, and the next morning I woke up and I was a citizen of Lynchburg.
Wow!
I was 5 years old, I think, and maybe this is how local government managers get born. But I knew something had changed. No big deal, but it was like, wait a minute, I was in the county last night. Now I'm in the city,
and I'm in the same house.
I'm in the same. We haven't moved. Taxes went up.
So accelerating the project, I would have to assume, had a lot of benefits because, it's great that there's this 20-year plan, but people want to see results. And, fast forward to nowadays, we're in a very instant society. People want results right away, and waiting another 3 or 4 or 5 years until it's all done. And then when you're trying to get the private community, the private sector to invest in the downtown area, the progress is one thing, but the results really, I would imagine, made a big difference.
Yeah, how you balance out that timing is important. And one of the other things, in addition, I think, to Randy's leadership, was there were some private sector individuals who said, I want to go there, but I can't wait around 3 or 4 years to go there. And I've got some investment that I can make now, but I just can't wait that long. And because, the economy ebbs and flows and rises and falls, and people may have some money to put into an investment today that they won't have in 2 or 3 years, or they'll find something else that's more lucrative for them. And so that's really important. And I think being able to move more quickly helped us to do that. It's one of the things that I think the city we learned early on, was to sit down with the private sector people who were coming in with a development proposal and just ask them, what is your schedule? How can we try to accommodate your schedule? Realizing we've got certain rules and regulations we have to follow. If we have to have a public hearing or, all these other things, it's going to take some time, but tell us how we can accommodate you because they're not making any money until they open the doors
right.
and start selling stuff.
And that's the end game, right? Is you need the private investment, the private sector to come in and open businesses and build apartments and do all those different things that we're now seeing done.
Right.
City Stadium, also something that got revitalized under your watch, and that was critical because, and I didn't know this, but we were in jeopardy of losing minor league baseball.
We were, after a long history of minor league baseball, and some people may say that, well, that whole thing's just not that important. You know, in the grand scheme of things, maybe the city stadium's not important, or the baseball's not important. But again, when you go back and look at the history of Lynchburg, it's relevant, and it's important to some people. And there have been public activities there at City Stadium for 150 years in Lynchburg. It was, there's a racetrack out there, there's a fairgrounds out there. It's just so it's part of the character of the community. If city council had said, to heck with it, we're not going to do it, we don't care if we have baseball or not, it wouldn't have happened. But city council, a majority of city council said, no, we would like to find a way that's reasonable, that doesn't require taxpayer, an infusion of a lot of taxpayer money. Plus, frankly, it was a facility that the city owned that was in disrepair. And whether there was a minor league baseball team there or not, there are things that happened there in that space that if you wanted it to continue to happen, it needed to be revitalized. And so it probably cost a little bit more to meet professional baseball standards, but the place was falling down anyway and needed to be fixed. And so those things came together, and with the help of some consultants and a path forward and how to pay for it, council accepted it, and we were able to keep baseball in Lynchburg.
You mentioned taxpayers, and we're seeing this more and more with, taxpayer-funded stadiums versus privately funded stadiums, and should the taxpayers be paying for this? And was that a situation where you got a lot of blowback or feedback on that, as far as taxpayers wondering, hey, look, is this really something that we should be footing the bill for?
No, we were not building a $30 million stadium, for a baseball team. We weren't even building a $10 million stadium for a baseball team. The city stadium complex, that's where both of our high schools play football. And that's pretty unique that we've got two high schools playing on one field. Most communities you go to, if there's two high schools, there's two fields. And I always think that's kind of something that Lynchburg can be proud of, the fact that we are able to share a facility that way. And so that whole place needed work. And we actually had a discussion, well, what happens here if the baseball team leaves? And the discussion was, we still got to maintain the stadium because it's a public facility that has other things that are going on here that need to be maintained. It's a park. Parks and recreation activities. We could have used it for a lot of things and would have used it for a lot of things in addition to the baseball. So we never had that debate about, are we spending public funds on an edifice, on a building, that is going to have, a professional baseball team's name on it and nobody else gets to use it. So that was never an issue.
It certainly seems to make sense, though, to have a baseball team playing in it if it's going to be sitting there. And got to use it as much as possible, right?
Well, I think, you use it, recover the investment that's there. Hopefully the baseball team is making enough money that they're going to stick around and they're sending revenue back into the city. The city gets admissions tax and meals tax and sales tax. And we have something that people from out of town can come to and enjoy and spend money and leave it here, and then they go away.
And you said you're still a season ticket holder.
I am. I feel like, I want it to work. So I have to put a little skin in the game too.
One other project that you oversaw, and you touched on this earlier, Heritage High School.
It was a huge challenge.
Why?
At that time, the biggest, I think, public expenditure for a building, maybe still so. I thought we've got some some utilities projects that are rivaling that right now, but certainly in terms of the general fund, a huge project. The challenge there was how to pay for it without having too much of a negative impact on the citizens. And we worked hard, and we planned, and we had a 10-year plan that we said we think we can do it in 10 years. And I think we did it in 8, which was kind of nice that it worked a little faster. But
that doesn't happen all the time.
No, it doesn't happen all the time. And again, the environment helps, the economy helps. We were able to borrow money at a good rate. There was a lot of work that went into that. I mean, there was a task force that met for probably over a year to say, do we have one high school? Do we have 2 high schools? Do we rebuild Heritage High School? Do we try to renovate what's here? Where might it go? What might we do? And again, we're operating within a system where it's Lynchburg. So how is Lynchburg going to educate its secondary students? If we had been part of a county, well, then we might have had a different discussion about, is there another way to serve the student population with some other school buildings that are not in the city? But we can't have that discussion because we're in an independent city. Lynchburg's big enough that it can handle that, but can you imagine that discussion in a small city, a city of 6 or 7 or 8,000 people that needs to replace a high school that maybe is losing population and could probably go out into the county? I think I told you that story when I was in Spotsylvania. We were building a new elementary school about every other year, and a new middle school every 2 or 3 years, and a new high school every 3 or 4 years. And the city of Fredericksburg had 3 schools and 1 school superintendent. And I told the city manager, why don't you just become a town and we'll take your 3 schools and it'll be more efficient for us and for you. And we'll have 1 less school superintendent to deal with. And he just told me it would never happen because of high school football. And I said, well, you're probably right.
High school
It's never
football.
happened. But, Fredericksburg, in my thinking, was small enough that they could be a town and still maintain their identity, but there would be some efficiencies gained. Again, they only had 3 schools. I was building 3 schools every 3 or 4 years. But again, tradition and history and community identity really is really what it's all about.
Looking at some of the challenges for Heritage and looking at the dynamic of the city, where you've got the Boonesboro area, where obviously a lot of higher priced homes, people paying more taxes, and a lot of the money going to build a school that the Boonesboro people weren't going to. Was that a factor, or was that not a factor?
Not really, because what had happened a few years before Heritage was that EC Glass had been renovated. And at a cost of, I'm thinking, $20 million-ish or so. I'm not sure. It was air conditioned. EC Glass was not air conditioned before then. So EC Glass has been air conditioned for less than 25 years. When you think about that, that's
crazy. Yeah.
Fortunately, when EC Glass was built in the 50s, it was built to last 100 years. And it's lasted more than 100 years. It will last more than 100 years because we went in and renovated it. And so it had really good bones. When Heritage High School was built, the first Heritage High School, it was built to last maybe 30 years. And it just about lasted 30 years. It was not built well. And that model of school had been used across the state. And everywhere that I'm familiar with, that schools no longer exist. They had to be replaced. Halifax County is one of the closest ones. No, we never got anything that said, well, why are you going to spend our money over there? Because glass was brought to a standard, and the feeling was that the students who went to Heritage High School deserved the same standard of quality. And our intention when that building was designed was we want a building that will last 100 years. We might need to renovate it in 50 years, but we want the building to last 100 years. And I think when you're spending public funds like that, you need to make that sort of an investment. Maybe it's a little bit more upfront, but in the long run, it really pays off.
Overall, people very pleased with the way that project turned out?
Well, I don't know. I don't live out there. I didn't have any school students out there. I think I've been in the building since it's opened maybe 3 or 4 times.
But I mean, you've heard feedback. Because you said it was a difficult project. People were against it. I mean, now that it's all
people were against the money.
The money, right?
And because it was a lot of money, and we were able to work that out. I mean, there was a tax increase to pay for it, but I would say the tax increase actually came from two things. One is the recession, and then the school. But council had lowered taxes before that recession occurred, and I had said to them, "Please don't lower taxes because we got to build a high school." And they lowered them, and then they raised them back to the same point they had been. But I think, I mean, from what I can understand, the building works well. I don't think there've been any leaking roofs, or I don't think there've been any. I think it's 10 years old now, probably a little bit more than 10 years old. I think functionally the building is still working. I think it's producing, it's educating students. I mean, the governor's school is there too, so we have some regional aspects there. I think the heritage students are excelling. I think you look at their athletic programs; they're doing great. I think heritage is on a par with EC Glass, and that's really what you want. You don't want to have a rich school and a poor school.
Yeah, haves and have-nots.
Yeah. I think within the schools there's have and have-nots within both schools, but I think on the outside, both schools are fairly equivalent.
I heard a story about a meeting you guys had, a Towns and Gowns committee meeting in April of 2014. And in that meeting, you were talking about different things that you needed to do in case of a crisis. And then you walked out of that meeting and there was a big cloud of smoke. Yeah. Uh-huh. And there was the train derailment and just a mess. And the irony of you guys coming out of that meeting talking about how we'll handle a situation like this, and boom, there it is.
We had just instituted what we call the Web EOC, Emergency Operations Center, where we didn't have to physically go to a place. And the Emergency Operations Center is and was over near Liberty, near Thomas Road Baptist Church, where our radio system, where the communications process is. And so in an emergency, we would all kind of gather up our stuff and go over there. We had power, we had communications, and we would manage an emergency. Well, with the Web EOC, we could kind of do that off our phones, and you didn't have to, although it's still good to be face-to-face and dealing with these issues. But yeah, we literally walked out of the room, and I could see the window that opened towards the north and this big black cloud of smoke, and just my heart fell, my stomach fell, and it was, really scary for about a half an hour.
And all the stuff that you guys were discussing and the plans that you had put in place, boom, here we go.
Yeah, and we had, as much as we would talk about our city departments being siloed, and maybe our police department not getting along with our fire department, and the public works department not getting along with anybody, or whoever. In a crisis, it is amazing to see everybody. You got a single focus, you got a vision, you got a mission, and everybody worked so well together. I mean, by the time I got down, I left the building and walked down towards the river. Fire department was there. The police department was there. They were working like a well-oiled machine. They were doing the things to protect both people and property. It was really amazing. And I'm getting text messages and phone calls from Al Jazeera and national. And I'm like, how do you even have my phone number? Wanting to know what's going on, because crude oil derailments were a big deal back then. We weren't the first, we weren't the last, but we got a lot of attention when it happened. It was scary, and it was enlightening, and I was just so proud to see the way the public safety people responded.
And to a degree, did we here in Lynchburg get a little bit lucky the way that shook out because of,
oh my God, we're so lucky.
Flips the wrong way.
The train fell into the river. If the train had not fallen into the river, I don't know what would have happened. I was convinced when I was walking down the hill that the Depot Grill was gone. And then I saw employees of the Depot Grill walking up the street, and I went, "Whew, you guys are okay." I had 2 children who worked there from the day it opened. So it's a special place to me. Plus, it was a city building that we converted into a private sector, business. It was, if that train had fallen the other way. But things work out. we're very fortunate.
Sometimes they do,
And
for sure.
And the fire was out in about a half an hour.
Well, what's the best advice you give to someone who's entering a role like a city manager, or, whether county or other municipality or whatever? What's the best advice you give them?
I think there's two pieces of advice. I think maybe three. I'm going to go in with the assumption that this person has integrity, because if they don't have integrity, if you can't believe what they say, then they should never be in that role of responsibility. So integrity is just kind of the foundation, the linchpin of all of that. But I would say secondarily, a manager needs at least two things. One is humility. One is you really need to listen to people and respect all the people that you're going to hear from, the citizens, the elected officials, the people who aren't citizens but who have an interest in your community. So that humility is really important. And then a sense of situational awareness. You got to know what's going on around you. You've got to keep your eyes and your ears, particularly your ears, open to find out what's going on, and learn from that, and then you can kind of see a path forward. If you're oblivious, if you're not interacting with people, it's about relationships and communication in the end. If you can't relate to people, if you can't communicate with people, you're just not going to be successful.
You had told me that one of the challenges that you see for yourself or city managers since you've been there is the timing of elections for city council. Explain.
Sure. I will preface that by saying it's not unique, or it's new in cities, but it's not unique. When I was in the county, elections were in November, and elected officials took office in January. Mm-hmm. When I first came to the city, the elections were in May, and officials took their seats in July. I think there's some advantages to that. Maybe not some advantages on the election side, and which is why it all got changed, but there's some advantages from a governing standpoint. And I'd mentioned to you that one of the biggest challenges, I think, of any elected official is to move from campaigning to governing. Mm-hmm. And when the elections were in May and they took office in July, there was a little bit longer runway for them to come in and make that transition from campaigning to governing. And it's mostly around the budget. What happens now is they get elected in November, they come in, get their seats in January. The staff's already been working on the budget for about 3 months. And so the manager's got a pretty good idea what the budget's going to look like. And if you get a group of new people coming in and saying, well, I told you that story about an elected official coming to me and saying, I think your budget's full of waste and full of fat. That's January. I mean, and I pretty well got the budget, my proposed budget moving forward, put together in January. And so you've got a really short period of time in which those newly elected officials have to react to information that you've been working on for 3 months. But plus, the budget process never really ends. You're always working on at least 3 budgets. You're working on the one you just finished, you're working on the one you're in, and you're working on the next one. How
much of a factor is it, when you talk about new council members coming in and they're going to vote on a budget that you've already been working on, if you see a turning of the page, so to speak, in city council where, it shifts from, and we'll get into this in just a second, from, say, a Republican to a Democrat or a Democrat to a Republican, where Republicans may come in and say, no, we're cutting taxes. You're raising taxes here because maybe that's what the previous council wanted. So when you talk about that timing, how big of a factor is that part of it?
Well, it can be a challenge because every budget that you put, even though a budget is only adopted year by year, a lot of the things that affect that budget were maybe decisions that were made 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. For example, if you decided you were going to build a new courthouse or a new police department or a new school, and it's under construction, well, you're paying debt service, and all that's got to get built in, and maybe it hasn't actually kicked in yet, but it's due to kick in this budget year. So there's a new expense that we haven't had in the past. You build a new, bigger police station, it's going to cost more to run the building. It's just the way it goes. And so you've got to start putting those expenses in. And if somebody comes in and says, well, you've got to cut all your expenses. We go, wait a minute, I'm opening a brand new building. I'm doing a thing we weren't doing before that we've been working on for 3 years now. And I'm going to not do it or not pay for it. And plus I'm doing all these other things that we say we want to continue to do that cost money or maybe even cost more. When in 2009, when we saw the bottoms fall out of our revenues, we went to the citizens and said, through a series of community meetings, and said, what do you want us to stop doing? Because we've got to do something here. We don't have the resources to sustain what we're doing. And the message we got was, don't stop a thing. We want you to continue doing it. Council raised taxes. It was an election year. They all got reelected. And the services were maintained. Somebody can dispute that and have a different perspective on that, but that was my perspective. And so part of the challenge is educating those newly elected council members to say, let me tell you where we're coming from, and let me tell you where we were told we were going. And if there's a majority of you that wants to not go there, let's talk about how we unwind this and what the repercussions of unwinding that are.
You said you asked the citizens, what do you want us to do away with? How did you do that? I mean, was it up to the citizens or was it up to council because they were elected?
It's ultimately up to council.
Okay.
It's ultimately up to council. But I have a strong belief that citizens have a responsibility for the government and the community in which they live. Now, again, that's kind of counter to what I said earlier about, as long as they don't know we're there and their life is going great, that's fine.
Right.
We're successful. That's true to a point, but they also are ultimately responsible. They're responsible for electing the people who make the decisions. And then those people hire the people like me. And so I think they have a responsibility to be informed and to provide input, not only during an election cycle, but they have the right, and I think maybe the responsibility, to be informed throughout the year and to provide input. And much of our system is set up in formal ways to provide them input, but there's also informal ways. The joke is that the Kroger on Boonesboro Road is where a lot of city business gets done because you can't get out of there without running into 6 people that you know.
Right.
And so discussions occur. Well, that's great, but it occurs at church, it occurs in social settings, it occurs, and that's the way a community works. And that's wonderful, and a community ought to work that way. But we actually had a series of meetings, I can't remember how many we had, where we actually said, we're going to meet this night, this place, all over the city. Please come. We would probably get 75 to 100 people at each of those meetings, and we would explain to them the situation as we understood it. We would explain to them the services we were delivering, and we would say, is there some change you want us to make here? Because we don't think we have enough money to pay for it, unless we do something different than what we're doing today.
So ultimately, they have their say, and then it comes down to what
council members were listening to that,
right,
yeah,
right.
And then we would report back, and then council. But ultimately, council has to make that decision. And if council had said, cut, or we would have. I mean, they had the same debate this year. We would have stopped doing things. The nature center in Parks and Rec. Things would have changed and things would have been different but the message we got was, no, we like it the way it is.
You mentioned that one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, that a manager needs to have is integrity. And I would imagine that transparency goes hand in hand with that. I was told that one of the things that former council members appreciated most about you was when it came to the budgetary process. It wasn't just you presenting the budget. You had the managers or the directors of every, aspect of the city presenting their portion of the budget so they could answer questions about, what they had done. And I guess that hasn't followed suit since then, but that was something that former council members really appreciated.
It worked for me. I think it generally worked. I think the recollection of it maybe is a little bit different than the reality was.
Okay.
I I allowed the department heads to be in the room.
I
so
did
their perceptions may be a little different than mine.
Well, I did hear that they didn't always get a chance to speak.
They didn't always get a chance to speak.
But
That's
they were
true.
there and were able to answer
they were
questions.
There. Yeah. And so what I would say, and I think Bonnie Severchek followed up, because Bonnie and I were a pretty tight team during this entire budget process. And then I think she carried on some of these things when she was manager. I would say this is what this department had asked for. 5 new positions, whatever, 6 new trucks. This is what I'm recommending. Only 1 new position and only 3 trucks or whatever. And that would be clear in the budget document. It was a 300 or 400 page document. And we would tell council, you want to go through every page? We'll go through every page. But I would kind of give the summary. This is what he or she asked for. This is what I'm recommending. This is why I'm not supporting what they're asking for. And here they are if you want to ask them any questions. Mm-hmm. And sometimes council is like, nope, we're fine. We're good. Or sometimes it was like, well, why aren't you giving them that second police officer or whatever? And I would say, well, here's where I am. And then the department head could, and I told him, make your case. You made it to me. It didn't work. You make it to them now.
But they're the ones who
they're the ones who get to decide. And what we would do is create what we call the list. And if a council member said, I want to put that on the list, that other police officer, fine. We added it to the list, and that extra police officer is going to cost $100,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I gave you a balanced budget. Now my budget's out of balance by $100,000. So we either better cut $100,000 somewhere or find some revenue that'll cover that. Mm-hmm. And so we'd end up with a list of 40, 50, 60 items. And the budget's now out of balance if you implement all that. And we would talk about and make decisions. It worked for us. I'm not going to question how any manager does it. I'm not, as you know, I'm not in the manager's role now.
Right.
It's been 10 years.
Right.
It's a different environment, clearly a different environment. And so I'm not sure what worked then would work now. I don't know.
And part of it being a different environment is the politics that are involved with it.
Yeah.
Only serving a couple of years. So you talked about you're campaigning and then you're governing, but then all of a sudden you're running for re-election. There's, there's a...
It's a constant flux now.
Yeah.
I think I shared with you when I was in Spotsylvania County, I did not experience staggered terms. I had my entire 7-member board was elected every 4 years, which has its own issues. Mm-hmm. There was 1 year when I had 4 new ones coming in, and I'm going,
oh boy,
4. That's the magic number. I wonder if they want a new manager. And you had to. We had that discussion actually. But again, when that occurred, I had, they had their first year, get them all on the same page. The second or third year, they kind of work together as a team. 4th year, they're all campaigning again. So all bets are off. Now with an election every 2 years, it's always somebody new or somebody getting ready to run for re-election. And what's, I think, more unfortunate now is sometimes sitting supervisors who are not running for re-election are campaigning against sitting board members or council members who are running for re-election. Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to work together as a team on Tuesday when they're out campaigning against each other the rest of the week. For whatever reason, I just don't. Again, my goal as the manager is to find 4 people who can give me direction, preferably 7, 6, but at least 4. And if they're fighting among themselves over things that are, again, from my perspective, not important to delivering services daily, which is what my job is, to deliver services daily, it makes it a more difficult environment. And we have seen that. So it's both the timing of the elections, I think. It's the staggered terms, whether instead of a 4-year, term, and it's the polarization and the partisanship that I didn't have early in my career. People didn't run as R's or D's; they ran as independent business people. You knew who was an R and who was a D, but they didn't bring that to the dais. They didn't say, because I'm an R or I'm a D, I have got to vote this way. And from my perspective, what I've seen is people who say, vote for me, I'm a strong leader, I'm going to help us. As soon as they get elected, they're told, if you don't do what the party that supported you tells you to do, then you're a bad elected official. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Because the first thing I'm doing is trying to tell them what's going on here. And if they don't believe that, or if they're not going to change if they're not going to learn, and they're only going to follow the party line of a group of people who don't have the same information that these elected officials now have access to, they could get it if they wanted it, but they're not going to do it. It seems to me that an elected official, and this is part of going from campaigning to governing, needs to be open to learning something that they maybe didn't know that might change their thinking about the promises that they made or thought they were going to keep when they got elected. And that's what governing is about, and the willingness to compromise. But if you're told you can't compromise, if an R proposes it, you've got to be against it because you're a D. And because we elected you as a D, not because you're intelligent but because you're a thing. It's a challenge, I think.
Is it even more important to, not necessarily be an R or a D on a very local level than it is when you're talking about a state level or a national level?
The city managers say that there's not a Republican or a Democratic way to fill a pothole or to plow snow. Now, I could play with that and create a way, but they would be totally stereotyping everything. But they're really, bottom line, running a wastewater treatment plant, running a water plant, solid waste management, streets and roads, you do that in an efficient and effective manner. That's the best way that you can, learning the technical skills that you need to do that. And I'm not sure that party politics have much to do with that. Now, there are some things where people can have those differences, and that's part of the way the world we live in. And so I think if you come in and you say, my entire goal here is to reduce taxes, fine. What's the impact on services? Is it also your goal to maintain services? Because there's going to be some conflict sometimes in doing both. You can't cut it and not spend the money and then expect this to maintain the same level of service, or in some cases, the demand to increase service. And I mean, just simply when you say we want to do more in one area, but not raise the resources to pay for it all, that implies that another area is going to get cut. Mm-hmm. You just need to have that conversation. You need to understand. And that's where the manager gets kind of caught in the middle going, all right, you want to do this thing, then you're asking me to tell you what to not do.
Right.
Maybe that you should tell me what's less important to you. And so it's challenging. To say
you can't just do one part of it without it affecting something else. Yeah. There's got to be a greater plan. If we're going to cut this, we can add this, or if we want to add this, we either have to raise taxes or cut something.
It's a very simple formula. Right. Yeah, you first of all, you need to pay for it, and things cost money. We used to always laugh when we'd go, well, wait a minute, everybody's telling me that we're operating, because we are in an inflationary environment, we need to cut taxes. Well, wait a minute, the cost of fuel just went up for all the city vehicles. The cost of tires went up. The cost of fertilizer went up. The cost of healthcare went up. And you're telling me that's less relevant than the cost of living that's going up everywhere else outside here? And somehow we can cut resources to pay for that and not have an impact on service delivery? It doesn't make sense to me that local government expenses don't operate in a vacuum. They're not independent of all the other expenses that everybody has to deal with. And yeah, a good conversation about trade-offs and then finding the 4 votes to make a decision. But you're not going to do that without repercussions. And the friction comes in, who are we going to blame here? Do we want to blame the manager, or do we want to blame the elected officials? Ultimately, remember I told you this newly elected official who came to me when I was in the county and said, your budget's full of fat. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's not my budget. I did not adopt it. I recommended it. The board adopted it. And if anything in here you don't like, find 3 more votes and take it out. Mm-hmm. And So I'm pretty rigid about those areas of responsibility, but in reality, it's a whole lot messier than that, because governing body looks to the manager and says, okay, what can we cut? And then, so I'm looking at one of my department heads saying, you're less important than another department head. Our sacrificial lamb was always the Parks and Recreation Department. They always got nailed in the budget process. But you balance public safety against Parks and Rec, and guess who wins?
Yeah.
Public safety wins. Yeah. Because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're going to take care. Safety is paramount.
I could almost, envision you going to that director and be like, what now?
Well, yeah, what can you cut now? Yeah. And it happened this year, Parks and Rec, but we used to have a discussion with our elected officials once in a while about what are core services? Mm-hmm. What are the things that if there was nothing here and we needed to build this city, what would we absolutely have to have first? Well, public safety is always first. I mean, it's always first, because if you're not safe, you can't operate. But then quickly after that, it was like, well, we need transportation, we need roads. Okay, well, in the counties don't pay for their roads. The state does. But in the city pays for its roads with state money, with some state money. So is roads a public responsibility? And then people will say, well, what about a fire department? I say, well, a lot of counties don't operate with paid firefighters or paid EMS. They operate with volunteers. And so there's no mandate for us to have a volunteer fire or to have a paid fire department. There's no mandate for us to have a paid rescue squad. We'd be crazy not to, because of the environment that we're in, but there's no mandate. There's no mandate to pick up trash every day. We have to have a solid waste plan. We have to have a plan, but we don't have to pick it up.
Right.
And so understanding what's required, and then the list of what's required is fairly short. But then now what do we want for a successful community in which people can thrive and live and work?
And then how do you prioritize it, and how do you pay for it?
And do you want a community without parks, without trails, without recreation programs, without museums, without libraries, without swimming pools, without cultural events? Do you want to live there? Maybe not. Most people, I would say maybe not. Don't want to live in that environment. They want to live in an environment that's rich, that has opportunities for them and their families. And so that's what we struggle with. The joke is everybody wants it and nobody wants to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, understanding that reality of the world, now I've got 7 people here who are elected to make decisions about this. And how can I help them make the best decisions this year or right now for this community, realizing that often what they do may have longer term repercussions, but it's rarely totally irreversible. I mean, they can modify it over time. But again, you decide to build a building, you sign a contract. It might take 18 months to build it, and you might not start paying for it for 2 years. Sorry, you're stuck. Yeah. You got to build it. You got to finish it.
All about those 4, huh?
Yeah, 5's better.
5. So you're doing some consulting work. I know you have 12 grandchildren. You've done some traveling.
Yep.
Life good?
Life is good. Life is very good. Yeah. It's retirement's a good gig if you can get it.
What's next for you?
I'm getting older, We just, you start to think about, okay, you kind of know how this is going to end, and how do you get there gracefully? And so just how do you continue to be of service and of value, and an individual that can still give back to your community, even though maybe your capacity and your energy to do it are less. So that's something we're thinking about. I've been fortunate that I've been able to maintain a fairly high degree of activity because my wife has not stopped working. And she is providing a service to this community that is incredibly important. And how we both gracefully move out of that, into whatever the next stage, a less active stage of life is. Mm-hmm. It'll involve grandchildren in some way. So, how that works. None of them live here, so it may mean we go somewhere else to be closer to grandchildren. It's the sort of things you start to think about when you're, in your approaching your mid-70s.
And you were telling me that grandchildren are great, maybe even, I don't want to say better than children, but
Well, grandchildren are the reward that you get for raising your children and not killing them. Well, that's where everything about you is that I'm going to want to strangle you. They bring you grandchildren. It's a wonderful thing.
Because you can give them back when you're done.
You can give them back. And all you come back with is a cold, which my wife will kill me for saying. But
really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. Love learning more about, not just your tenure and what your accomplishments were, but the role of city manager, how government works. It's been really, really enlightening. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I guess you can tell I'm still pretty passionate about local government. And one of the reasons that I do this is I want to make government in Virginia better. That's our goal. My goal when I came to Lynchburg was to leave it better than when I came. I hope it's better. I hope it's not worse, and I don't think it's worse. I think it's as good as or better. And that's why many of us are in local government management, is to make the community a better place. And if I can do that, have some influence somewhere else, that's what I think still adds value and gives me joy.
Well, as far as I can tell from my personal experience and the number of folks that I've talked to, you accomplished your mission. We're in a better spot. Thank you.
Thank you.